A cake-related fat-phobic incident.
No one has to be healthy. No, right? Like, I mean, it's like, and I want to back up and bring in intersectionality and say, like, right, like, look at the disabled community.
They're giving this person tens of thousands of tax dollars to be a new public health expert for the government. You can't make this stuff up. We're going to break down this crazy story out of San Francisco and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our politics, and the media, all from an independent perspective. Like I mentioned, up first, we've got to check in on California, where the body positivity movement just joined forces with left-wing local governments to produce an outcome so absurd, I honestly wouldn't believe it was real if I hadn't read the reports with my own eyes. The government of San Francisco is bringing in a pro-fat positivity activist as an official government consultant for the city's public health initiatives and giving her thousands of taxpayer dollars. Yes, seriously. Here is the San Francisco Chronicle. San Francisco taps body positivity expert to work with public health department on reducing weight stigma. An image of the woman, Virginia Tovar, accompanies the article, showing her in 2013 and saying that she campaigns against weight stigma and advocates for weight neutrality in public health. She has been tapped by San Francisco as a short-term consultant to the city's public health department. There's a lot to unpack there. First, notice that they're not bringing her in to work on reducing obesity, which is a public health crisis in this country, but reducing the stigma associated with weight. Now, of course, I don't support bullying or shaming of any kind, but there's a reason that being overweight is stigmatized, because it's very bad for you and very harmful. And the idea that any government public health department would embrace someone who believes in weight neutrality when there is such a weight of science on behalf of the fact that being obese or morbidly obese drastically shortens your average lifespan and causes all sorts of health issues that are some of the top causes of preventable deaths in the United States today, shouldn't surprise me at this point, because after COVID and everything else we went through, government public health departments really have become, it is clear they are kind of a joke in many ways, but still, this has to be something of a new low. Of course, it's a win for Miss Tovar, who wrote in an Instagram post, "I'm working with a team at the San Francisco Department of Public Health as a consultant on weight stigma and weight neutrality. I'm unbelievably proud to serve the city I've called home for almost 20 years in this way. This consultancy is an absolute dream come true, and it's my biggest hope and belief that weight neutrality will be the future of public health." God help us if that's ever the case. Because that would mean that a totally anti-science belief and agenda had spread throughout public health, which actively goes against everything we know about the way that having excess fat inside your body harms human health. The Public Health Department's Health Eating and Active Living program hired Tovar on a temporary basis to educate staff on how to address weight stigma and body positivity when developing public health programs, the department said in a statement Wednesday. The contract ends on June 30th, 2025, and totals $12,000. Ah, yes, more tax money being well spent. You can't make this up. Now, guys, we are going to go into more of what this woman believes, and I'm going to show you a couple clips of things she said that are jaw-dropping in their insanity. But first, here's a quick message from today's sponsor. Guys, I got a phone call on my personal cell phone at the gym the other week from somebody who found my phone number online and was looking to get me to promote their book. That was kind of creepy, and it's why I'm so glad to be partnering with today's sponsor, Incogni. Because as we speak, your personal information is being bought and sold online without your knowledge and consent. It can be used to harass or stalk you, spam you with robocalls, or even commit crimes against you, like taking out fraudulent loans on your behalf. That's where Incogni comes in. Incogni reaches out to data brokers, companies that are selling your data on your behalf, and requests your personal data and handles any objections on their end. And the whole process is automated. Plus, they take care that your data stays off the market by conducting repeated removals, taking your data down if it pops up again. And Incogni is available for 30 days risk-free, meaning you guys can try it out for yourselves and get a refund if you're not happy with the services. Go to incogni.com/Polumbo and use promo code Polumbo to get 60% off an annual plan and protect yourself from creeps and scammers today. All right, guys, now we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive to show you a sense of who this woman is, Ms. Tovar, who the San Francisco Public Health Department is bringing in and funding with taxpayer dollars. Take a look at this video where she warns us about the very serious fat phobia that's destroying our society, including cake-related fat phobia incidents, apparently.
Oh my God, that slice is huge. That slice is bigger than Beyonce's paycheck. Can you cut me half of that?
A cake-related fatphobic incident, or CRFI, is that moment when it's time to eat delicious cake and it's interrupted by a moralizing impulse. Inevitably, there's always someone at the party who has to declare publicly that their slice is too large and that the person who's cutting the cake, almost invariably a woman, must do some disproportionate amount of labor in order to accommodate their need to feel superior. Let's take a look.
Can you do a little bit? Can you scrape all the frosting off and cut it in half and give me 2 forks because I'm sharing? Small, a little bit more, tiny, no, less than what you're smaller, please.
Could you just cut my piece into 12 equal symmetrical little pieces and put each one into a tiny little Tupperware so that I can have a bite for each month of 2018?
Guys, this is San Francisco's newest public health expert who they're giving tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to educate the city on fat positivity. You cannot make this crap up. I thought this was the Babylon Bee, but it's real life. I mean, the idea that you would be so pressed about some other people exercising portion control, with God knows this country needs far more of, not less, that it would somehow affect you or you would consider it some sort of bias incident is insane. Eat your slice of cake. Some other person asking for a smaller slice does not affect you, and it is not some form of bigotry akin to racism. Fat phobia is not even a real concept. Obviously, being cruel to fat people isn't necessary and isn't kind, but of course you're afraid of being morbidly obese or overweight. That's not an irrational phobia. It's common sense. It's basic intuition based on what we know about human health and longevity. It's not some form of irrational bigotry. It's a desire of basic self-preservation and logic. It doesn't shock me that this kind of person exists. Obviously, in all of these various left-wing social causes, different grifts and cottage industries have cropped up. The people from the Robin DiAngelos to the fat positivity activists like this woman can have come and occupied and profited from. But it does shock me a little bit. I mean, it probably shouldn't at this point, but it still is just mind-blowing to me that governments are bringing these people in for public health expertise as consultants, coming from the same people that lecture right-wingers about being anti-science. The math here is not mathing, but I'm just fat phobic, I guess. Of course, this woman also brings expertise in critical theory to the table.
Let's take a step back and view what's happening through a critical feminist lens. CRFIs typically happen in environments where there are primarily or exclusively women. Women are disproportionately negatively affected by diet culture because diet culture maps onto sexism. Like many parts of diet culture, there is a significant performance component. You have to show others that you are being good. Controlling how much you eat is part of what it means to be a, quote, good woman. This kind of behavior is a way for people to keep other people in check through food moralizing, surveillance, and policing. These are the mechanisms that are at the core of diet culture and weight control. The idea that you can position yourself as superior to others through self-control and self-denial is super sexist. CRFIs have a history of creating a hierarchy among women and ultimately in maintaining misogynist expectations.
I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what half of that is even supposed to mean. It's another one of these things where they just throw buzzwords together in random combinations and hope that people nod along and clap along like seals. Obviously, I think women do face more weight stigma and more shame for their bodies and what they eat, and that's a valid thing to talk about, obviously. But men and women alike try to control their portions and want to lose weight and want to be slim, and to claim that asking for a smaller slice of cake reinforces the patriarchy or something, it really strains credulity far past its breaking point, at least in my eyes. What's interesting to me is that this woman is San Francisco's newest public health consultant, but also doesn't seem to really care about whether people, herself included, obviously, are actually healthy, which seems peculiar at the very least.
Where do you see the intersection really? What is your definition of health?
Yeah, that's really complicated, right? I think I want to talk about that question, but I want to start by saying that, no one has to be healthy. No, right? Like, I mean, it's like, no, like there is no governing body that's like out there putting, you know what I mean? It's like no one owes anybody that in either the traditional sense of the word or any other more innovative or, more politicized, maybe even version of that word. So I think it's important to say like, and I want to back up and bring in intersectionality and say like, right, like look at the disabled community, right? Like I think people with disabilities have and activists within that space have consistently been saying like, I'm never going to be your notion of healthy. That doesn't mean I don't get to be a full human. You get to treat me some kind of way, right? And so I think that I love taking that principle within disability rights to fat activism and to understandings of fatness. So I want to start there, right? Like no matter what size you are, you don't owe anybody else your health.
So, I mean, I do agree that nobody has to be healthy. I don't support the police coming around and confiscating your potato chips if you're obese or whatever. But you would think that somebody who's going to be a public health expert would want people to be healthy. And I'm just not really getting that vibe. I mean, her whole thing is weight neutrality, body positivity, celebrating obesity as if it is not a bad thing, even though it in fact objectively is. So she seems openly anti-health, or at least, I guess at the best possible, most charitable perspective, kind of neutral on whether people should be healthy or whether that's important, which just isn't really what I think public health would want to prioritize. But I guess who am I to question the infinite wisdom of San Francisco government bureaucrats? Of course, the second half of this clip that I just showed you is what actually kind of pissed me off. Do not compare overweight people or morbidly obese people like yourself to disabled people. Disabled people can't help the issues that they face, and many of them overcome tremendous adversity and are so impressive and go on to live healthy lives other than their disability and are really admirable and take agency over their lives. And you're comparing the product of your choices, of you choosing to overeat, choosing to be inactive, to that of somebody who's confined by fate to various limitations through a disability. That's actually offensive. As intersectional as you seem to be, you don't realize what a slap in the face that is to disabled people. To say that your bad choices and their consequences are akin to their immutable fate that they were unfortunate enough to luck into is really not okay. It's not a valid comparison, and it comes off as incredibly, incredibly ignorant. And back to the original point of this clip, you don't owe anyone else your health, really, but I think you kind of owe it to yourself to do the best you can to take care of yourself. And it's kind of sad to me to see people glorifying what is essentially a form of self-harm as if it is some form of valid identity or lifestyle choice, when it isn't. It is slowly but surely leading many people, and I'm not talking, guys, about being just a little chubby or adding a couple extra pounds around the holidays. I'm talking about serious morbid obesity that is encouraged and celebrated. You're encouraging people slowly killing themselves. That's just the truth. It'll shave decades off their lifespan on average. It leads to all sorts of serious health issues and heart-related issues and all kinds of things that bring people to an early grave. Yet not only has this woman built a career off promoting that, now actual governments are embracing it and funding it with taxpayer dollars. This is absolute insanity and utter lunacy, but I guess it's kind of par for the course at this point for 2024. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and do hit that like button and make sure subscribe if you aren't yet. Plus, remember, guys, I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. So do comment with your thoughts. And if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. Up next, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this might be the dumbest socialist TikTok of all time. Take a listen.
The reason you believe communism and socialism are inherently evil and that no other economic system that redistributes wealth better than capitalism can succeed, and the reason you've only ever been taught negative things about communism and socialism, are because you are a victim of propaganda.
No, it's because I can read. And I have read all about the horrific and mortifying and deadly failures of state-run economies and communist political systems in the 20th century. From Mao's China to the Soviet Union, where this ideology was actually tried, it led to famine, devastation, oppression, and wide-scale death and human suffering. That's not propaganda. It's simple matters of the historical record that people can educate themselves about at their will. Somebody does appear to be a victim of propaganda, but it isn't me. Not this time.
Because how socialism and communism were originally conceived, why they became an idea, was in response to the observation of the massive, widespread human suffering brought on by the rise of capitalism and industrialization.
Actually, no, that's not how that works. First and foremost, is the massive suffering caused by capitalism, is it in the room with us right now? Because back here, in reality, the spread of capitalism and free trade across the globe has actually corresponded with enormous, historic, unprecedented reductions in global poverty, maternal mortality, child death, and so many other things. We've made tremendous progress. I'll link to humanprogress.com and you can see more at the sources that I'll link to. But the world has gotten better for all, but especially the people at the bottom of society's ladders because of the spread of capitalism and the enormous increase in wealth and economic activity it's generated throughout the world and for everyone, not just the super rich. I mean, just one statistic. Only 200 years ago, more than 80% of the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, it is under 9%. But tell me more about how capitalism is causing widespread human suffering and destruction. I just feel like people like this live in an opposite reality to the one that I live in. They also honestly just seem deeply naive.
Socialism and communism as ideas were conceived to help alleviate human suffering. That is the point of them as economic and social systems and structures for society. Regardless of how much they have been bastardized and hurt people, just like capitalism, banana republics, whatever, the point of them as economic and ideological systems is to alleviate suffering and human misery brought on by income inequality. But no merits of the systems can be talked about or taught because they must be suppressed. Food for thought.
So again, this dude seems to miss the point. It might be true that socialism and communism were thought up with the intention of alleviating human suffering. Maybe Karl Marx and other people like him had the best of intentions. I'm actually kind of skeptical about some of that, but let's accept that at face value. Intentions aren't worth a damn. It doesn't matter what people intended when they invented a system or a philosophy. What matters is how it works out in reality. And in reality, it works out terribly for people. So I don't care if it's well intended. If the actual practical outcomes it leads to are bad, then the intentions aren't worth shit. And he also seems to have a real misunderstanding of economics, because there are some negative societal consequences to high levels of income inequality, but he seems to act like inequality itself is the same thing as poverty, and it isn't. What matters most is your absolute state of living. Can you feed yourself? Can you clothe yourself? Can you travel? Do you have housing? These things. It does not matter. It's not the most important thing or even the primary determinant of people's happiness and thriving, how much somebody somewhere else in their country has in their bank account, which is, when we talk about income inequality, we're really talking about a tiny slice of people who are ultra rich. Well, their wealth fluctuates massively because of stock valuations. It might go up by billions of dollars over the span of weeks and then crash by tens of billions of dollars a few weeks later. You're not better or worse off, even though the economy on paper is much more unequal, or all of a sudden, oh, it just got a lot more equal because their stocks all plummeted, or what have you. That's not what matters most, how much you have in relation to others. No, what matters is your absolute standard of living. That's what matters most. But socialists and communists, they see the world first and foremost through the lens of class envy. And I think that's the problem with their philosophy and why I find it so incredibly unappealing and alien. And he's not wrong that socialism has been bastardized in some cases, or they haven't had true, real communism or socialism. I'm even willing to grant them that. But that's also true for capitalism. The capitalist economies that we have today in the United States or elsewhere are not true free market principled capitalism. They are heavily distorted by government intervention, subsidies, regulations, all sorts of things. So what you have is imperfect socialism and imperfect capitalism. Comparing the two, one works and one doesn't. Even the places that people like this cite as socialist successes, like the Nordic countries, are actually just capitalist market economies with some higher welfare state policies. They're not fully socialist or communist, not even close. And in fact, a couple of years ago, one of the government leaders, I'd have to look the story up for the details, from one of those countries told Bernie Sanders to stop calling us socialists. We're not socialist, we're capitalist. It's disturbing to me when I see so many young people in my generation, in my peer group, and in the peer group below me have these distorted views of what capitalism is and what socialism is, and these bizarre positive views and viewpoints towards communism or towards socialism. But it makes sense when you realize that they are the ones being inundated with propaganda like this video that misleads far more than it informs. What do you think? Do you agree with the guy in the video? Let me know in the comments. I do want to hear from you, and make sure you hit that like button while you're at it. And now it's time to read some people for filth, because the folks in Congress are doing something that I just think is absolutely disgraceful. Some of them are pushing to give themselves a significant salary increase, even though Americans, by and large, think they're doing a terrible job and they already earn more, far more than average American families. Politico has this story: lawmakers are primed to get a pay bump, but some aren't happy about it. Basically, they're fighting over this big budget bill right now in Congress, and in recent years, they've always included a provision that prevents automatic pay increases for Congress for going into place. So Congress hasn't had a raise in many years, although they still earn over $170,000 a year, which is far more than average Americans. But on this latest budget bill, that language has actually been removed. So if it were to pass in its current form, they would get a more than $6,000 pay increase in January 2025. Some moderate lawmakers are speaking out against this and actually expressing some common sense pushback to the optics and the merits of this ill-timed proposal. Members of Congress earn more than 90% of Americans. If any of my colleagues can't afford to live on that income, they should find another line of work, Representative Jared Golden, a Democrat from Maine, said in a statement. Mainers can't wave a wand and give themselves a raise, and Congress shouldn't either, especially when most voters would tell you our job performance is poor at best. Until the pay freeze is reinstated, I will not vote for this continuing resolution, he added. Some Republican members oppose any pay increase as an emblem of overzealous federal spending. I hope these opponents are successful, but the establishment, at least of both parties, does seem interested in giving themselves a raise, even though most Americans think they're doing a terrible job, and even though they earn more than 90% of Americans. Now, some on the right have spread false information about this, claiming that they're giving themselves a 40% pay increase. Elon Musk shared a tweet that said there's a provision in the CR that would give members of Congress an increase from $174,000 a year to $243,000 per year. This is actually not correct. It's based on a misinterpretation of some of the policies in this bill. Fact checkers have pointed this out, but what the legislation would do is give them a 3.8% increase, which comes out to $6,600 per year. That's not 40%, and Elon Musk really needs to be a lot more careful about just casually spreading stuff on Twitter, but he does this all the time, spread stuff that's not fact-checked, but it's still a lot of money, and it's still far more than many Americans got as any sort of raise or salary increase this year. I think it's disgraceful that these people think they deserve a raise, even though they've done such a terrible job, and part of the reason that the cost of living has gone up so much is because of their own damn terrible policies. But here's something even worse that is in the continuing resolution. The bill would also allow lawmakers to opt out of the Obamacare health insurance marketplaces and use the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program. The lawmaker mandate was a dramatic element of the fight over passage of the Affordable Care Act on Capitol Hill back in 2009 and 2010, and Republicans have been trying to overturn the transformative healthcare bill since then. So basically, members of Congress, if this provision goes through, would be allowed to opt out of Obamacare and instead go on the pretty good federal benefits that federal bureaucrats get. Again, hell no. Y'all passed this failed healthcare policy that you force millions of Americans to buy into, even though it's totally unaffordable and a hot mess in so many ways, and now you want to exempt yourselves. This is why everyone hates y'all. This is why your approval rating is lower than Nickelback's. Now, I want to show you guys a clip where CNN called out a Democratic senator for the fact that they're pushing this, and things got messy.
Members are giving themselves a pay raise. Do you guys deserve a pay raise?
Well, that's news to me. It's good news. You know, what has it been, 10 years or 14 years and no COLA, no change at all? I think it's about time something's done.
You support giving yourselves a pay raise?
How would I not know about a pay raise?
But I mean, people look at the performance of Congress and say, why should we give them more money?
What about the media? Think about that for a second.
And we're not paid by public money.
I know you're not, but I mean, half of your listeners are not there anymore. You're still getting the same paycheck? What's going on?
Well, I mean, your taxpayer money. I mean, you guys deserve a raise.
There are so many problems with this clip that I hardly know where to begin. But first and foremost, Dick Durbin, the Democratic senator that you heard from here, he's a member of leadership. Yet he doesn't know that they're passing a pay increase in this massive bill. That's not good. It seems kind of reasonable to me that Americans ought to be able to expect that lawmakers actually know what they're voting on and how they're spending our money and aren't doing so unknowingly. But of course, when they put together these massive packages and force people to pass them, they're able to slip all sorts of stuff into it. That's actually part of the corruption. That's part of the grift. That's why they do it like that instead of following the traditional budget process where you pass each budget separately for each department. You go through each item. No, they threaten us with a government shutdown and they say, you got to pass all of this. You don't really know what's in it. We'll release it 24 hours before the vote. You won't have time to read all of it. It's a corrupt grift. It's something that they do so they can get away with wasting our money in too many ways to count. But yeah, it's really glaring when you see it in 4K like this, that the leadership doesn't even know what they're voting on, let alone the rank and file members. It's a disgrace, and it's just everything that's wrong with Washington, D.C. in a nutshell. And for him to go and try to flip this back on CNN, like, far be it from me to shill for CNN and act like, oh yeah, they're great, they're doing amazing, but they're not getting paid by taxpayers. So it's not really my business how much they get paid. Like, that's up to the business owners. And guess what? If their ratings tank for long enough, they will fire people. They will reduce salaries. Like, they have market incentives. So it's just not at all comparable to Congress taking our money and paying themselves more against our will and without our consent. Like, it's a total deflection that's just disgraceful because it's so obviously disingenuous and apples to oranges. And again, it's like, take some accountability. If you're gonna take our money and cash out and pay yourself more, even though you already make so much more than average Americans, like, at least own up to it, and don't try to deflect by blaming CNN or whatever. I don't know. You guys can probably hear how much this story pisses me off, but I cover politics. I see this kind of stuff. I know how this sausage is made, but still, just the disgraceful nature of it all, how unprincipled and how shameless a lot of these people in power are, never ceases to amaze me and make me slightly nauseous. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section, and hit the like button while you're at it. And now I'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from recent episodes. One person commented, "Ew, dude, we don't need to hear anything about your boyfriend," in quotes. "Please keep your personal life to yourself." Actually, on my channel, I'm going to talk about my life. And the majority of people actually do like me and want to know what's going on with me, which is why they subscribe to my channel. I mean, if you are grossed out by gay people existing, this ain't the channel for you. Don't let the door hit ya. Like, unsubscribe. It's the audacity for me, for you to comment and think that you get to tell me what to talk about on my channel. Sir, see yourself out, okay? Bye-bye. Another person says, "Where is Taylor Swift when you need her?" It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. And this is for that creator that kept complaining about being misgendered. Also, this creator has eaten at more nice restaurants in 2 years than I probably have in my entire life. I'm not one to go over everyone I see with a privilege detector, but if I was, it would be beeping like crazy around Lily. That is such a good point. It is always funny to me how many of the woke people online are ironically like the most privileged people imaginable, but yet they're constantly cosplaying as victims. It's kind of nauseating. Another person says, "Thanks, I read somewhere once that the next civil war will not be fought with guns, but with words and hatred." I'm wondering if the person who said that thinks we are already in our next civil war. You know, I don't really agree with that. I think that might be how it would start, but I actually think things could actually get violent in the future, and that really worries me. So I think hatred and closed-mindedness is bad, but it's always going to be, to some extent, a part of rancorous political discourse in such a divided and diverse country like ours. It's when we cross that bright red line that I think we're in real trouble. Another person says, big fan. 1, nobody's opinion is more valid than anyone else's. 2, me being biased. Of course you have a boyfriend. Look at those eyebrows. Oh, you're saying they're good, I hope? Another person says, "I'm a refugee and a U.S. Army retiree, so I have been vaccinated 100x over the average human being, and I'm only on the spectrum slightly, but I'm pretty sure my quirks, gifts, disabilities came before all the vaccines." 4, vaccines save lives more than they take life. I would hope parents trust science over opinions. Lastly, does it affect me what anyone thinks about this or that? About me, maybe, but if you are a family, friend, neighbor, or colleague, but everyone is entitled to theirs and me to mine without hate, heartache, or headache. That is all. Well, that last sentence, I think, is a good approach to have, that people are entitled to their opinion, and we can vigorously disagree with them, but still acknowledge that. Another person writes, "Your position on vaccines and autism is entirely correct, and I thank you for doing this segment. My autistic 11-year-old, who knows his diagnosis, walked in during the RFK clip and said, 'Oh man, these people are not going to be happy when their kid gets the measles.' With a kid this brilliant and funny, I really have no desire to find out what caused his neurodivergence. Instead, I'm more interested in battling the therapy industrial complex that lobbies our political leaders to make more and more money off the backs of our children with really questionable practices, applied behavioral analysis being the worst. Thanks again, and keep up the amazing work. Well, I don't know anything about the different psychotherapy stuff you mentioned, but it sounds like your kid is really sharp and insightful, and I'm so happy for you that he's thriving and doing well. Another person said, Lily really might as well just wear a pronoun pin, at least until their transition is way further along. And for God's sake, get that perm out of your hair, Lily. We're not mind readers. If you can't expect us to see what you see in the mirror, because that's not reality, honey, we're living in reality, and we'll be kind to you, but you're not going to boss around everybody. You're not anybody special. You don't know better or less than any other human being on this planet. You know, I actually think Lily might know a little bit less than some other human beings on this planet, at least when it comes to common sense. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. And remember to comment with your thoughts. I do take the time to read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you want to make sure your comment gets read on the show, you can leave it with a super chat or a super thanks. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.